because it's recording. Okay. And we're looking at Megillat Esther tonight, starting off and looking at looking at the question of a dictator and autocrat. And what do we think? Okay, let's see what we got going on. So we're going to read the opening of Megillat Esther. Achashverosh. Hu Achashverosh hamalech mehuda b'Kush. Sheba be'ashrim miyah medina. And it was in the days of Achashverosh. That would be the Achashverosh who ruled from Hodu to Kush, from, we generally say, India to Ethiopia. They say Nubia. 127 provinces. So, although there is an interesting reading of some Chazal who say that Hodu and Kush are right next to each other, I think our general sense is that no, India is India and Kush is Ethiopia, south of Egypt, right? Small or large expanse of land here? Huge. How many time zones? Mick, you want to look it up? I'm interested in knowing the exact number of time zones. The easiest way to do it is just to see what time it is right now in Ethiopia and what time it is in India.
Time zones, India to Ethiopia. 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours. For some reason they go 30 minutes.
That's it?
Yeah, but it's longitudinal. It's more latitude than
okay. Right.
Because it's high and low.
Got it. Okay. Fine. Russia is 11 time zones wide.
Yeah. Although that, by the way, that might be the extreme. It might be one end of India. India probably has a few time zones in it. So.
Oh, okay. That could be also. And I wonder whether some places don't change the times. But
let me see. How many?
All right, it's not that important. It's just presumably is an empire. It's an empire from one end to the other.
All right, trivia. India is only one time zone. They just decided it's going to be one time in all of India.
So that might be irrelevant to what we talk about all the time, right? It could be that sunset's very different. Okay, fine. In those days, and it was in those days as the King Achashverosh sat on his royal throne, which was in Shushan, the capital. Now, what does that mean? Like as he sat there, like are we supposed to imagine like he's just like sitting there, or is as he sat sounds like as he took his place on the throne, which was in Shushan, which leads already some commentaries to suggest that the throne was indeed not always in Shushan, and there was a strategic decision to move it to Shushan. Shushan being the city of Susa in modern day Iran, and so so there was a strategic decision to shift it there. And so when he made that decision, Bishnat Shalosh L'Malcho Asam, in the 3rd year of his reign, which is when that happened, or maybe Asam Ishteh L'Chol Sarab Abadav, he made a feast for all of his officials and servants, Chel Parasu Madai, the administration of Persia and Media, Basarei Hamadinot Lefanab, and the officers of the different provinces before him. Officers of provinces. So Chel Parasu Madai, Persia and Media is that province, or is that what is that? Persia and Media.
Countries.
Persia Media is the motherland, right? The empire expands out of those. Would seem. I'm not here to give a course, nor have taken an official course in all the ancient Persian to do, but that's what it seems like. He was of them, and so Chel Paras Madai are his people. The Partamim are these people he consistently, these noblemen he deals with. And then you have Sarei Hamadinot, the officials, governors of the provinces before him. Who are they? Who governs the provinces? Who are the people who are governors of the provinces? We have two possibilities. What are the two possibilities?
They're appointed or they're local nobles?
Yeah, they're either his, I'm sorry, they're either the people who were the chieftains of their tribes, and now he has lorded over them, but he allows them to continue to play local governor, right? But they have to know they're going to have to pay tribute to him and whatever. But they function in their domains, or are they puppets that he has set up in each of these places, right? Puppets or his men who have now been put in charge. The Romans would do that, right? The Romans would set up their governors. Although we have some, interesting individuals who were and becoming governors also, but the Romans did that. So for the moment, we're gonna work with the presumption that they are foreigners. They are foreigners, and that's the method that he used. That they retain some of their role, and they are now invited to this feast. He makes a mishteh. What's the purpose of the feast? Anything explicit here? No, nothing explicit except for his taking the throne in Shushan. And it surrounds that to celebrate his solidifying, it seems, the empire. He's not going past Ethiopia, it seems like, and he's not going past India. This is the empire. And he's satisfied, and now we're going to make a gathering here. And he at that point he shows off the wealth of the honor of his rule. And the glory, the wealth of the glory of his greatness. Yamim Rabim. Now the part that's absurd sounding. A great many days, Shmonim Ma'at Yom, 180 days. 180-day feast. What does an 180-day feast look like to you, as you imagine it?
Non-stop partying for half a year.
Is it Mardi Gras? Right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yesterday is something, right? Right? Is it Mardi Gras all this time? Is it the World's Fair? It's a very, very different kind of thing, right? A different experience. Is it the Olympics kind of thing also, right? And it's intriguing how each of those might be very different purposes that you have when you have each of those, as I give you
I
three.
mean, it might not be something that big because it says at the end of it, he had a banquet for 7 days, so.
Well, so he's sponsoring this. It is possible, of course, this is like, a moving feast, and so like people are showing up from different regions at any given time. This week you have 5 royals from here and 2 royals from there, and they're honored. So people come as you want for the next half a year. That's a possibility, right? And when the 180 days is completed, so when at the end of that, the last 7 days, he makes a feast for all of the people who live in Shushan, the capital, from big to little. Gadol va'akaton mean
The important people as well as the peasants.
yeah, right. That I think the translation here chooses high and low alike. That's not a bad a distinction from big and little. Doesn't mean adults and children. It doesn't mean children. It means people of all stations. Okay, they're all invited. So whereas the 180 feast is for noblemen and the people that the king is seeking to solve some to control. Come back to that. Last 7 days, he opens the doors and invites all of the city in. And now we pause and we talk about when we mention showing off the wealth. What do we mean? Etc. We're giving a picture of this palace, which is with all the expensive dyes and fabrics and the alabaster columns and the gold and silver furnishings. It could be that the palace has now been completed, and this is to celebrate the palace, right? If possible. And then we're told about the feast itself. Vashkot b'chlei zahav, and he gave drink. The drink was in golden vessels. B'chelim mikelim shonim, and the vessels were of all different types, which implies that he didn't have one mold to create each of his items. Each one was a unique work of an artisan, right? And an abundance of wine. Kiyad Hamelach, as the king's abilities were there, and it was indeed the royal wine was flowing. Vashtiya chadat ein ones. But you should know that the drinking, according to the law, ein ones. What's ones mean? Ones? La'anos means to, in the biblical use, it means to rape, right? But it means to force oneself, duress. We speak about if someone's experiencing onus in halacha, you mean that he's under duress, he can't avoid a situation. So the rule was that we don't force you to drink. Because that's what the king had established on all the people that were in charge to do according to everyone's wishes. So, as you read through the first 8 verses, which one of these verses is the one that you actually want to ask a question about, factually, about why we're being told something?
I mean, it's more of why is he doing this? Why in the 3rd year? Why, did he just come to power? Did he take over his wife as the more important person on the throne?
So what is the purpose of this feast, right? Is this, we can conjecture that, this is about arrogance and showiness. And then the story is a person who was full of himself, and how he is going to be suddenly in crisis, okay? Because he oversteps with his wife and everything kind of collapses, and because a guy was a boar and an animal and always filled with his power, his head filled with power, so that's before you know it, these things happen, but it makes an opening for Esther, right? So that's one possibility. It's a story of an arrogant boar. What's another version of the story?
He's giving a party for his newly acquired citizens and showing them how how his rule is egalitarian and not coercive, and
so good.
Trying to win over their hearts.
So there is some strategy here in creating this this feast that it is part of what it means to say, oh my God, I'm ruling over 127 provinces. And what do I need to do? What do I need to do?
He's winning hearts and minds
to be successful. Let me read to you from here. It's my favorite Torah on the book of Esther. Those who were in my class before know that I've drawn on this, The Dawn by Yoram Chazoni. He republished this with a few extra chapters. I don't have it. He also renamed the book. But here, let me read to you what he says. So he's interested in this verse, where he's into a lot of the pieces here, but this verse about no coercion on the drinking. What's that about? Here's a guy who we're gonna presume is a dictator, right? He has conquered 127 provinces, and even if there are Sarei Medinot who were not his puppets put in, but there are others there, he in the end is controlling them. Let's read what he says. The great rabbinic exegete Rabbi Levi emphasized the point by suggesting Okay. The presumption, of course, was that if one were invited to a royal carnival for 6 months, he calls it a carnival, interesting choice, one came. And if one were given wine to drink in abundance, one drank wine in abundance. And the king's officers would ensure that this was the case. And indeed, they would force it down your throat if you weren't ready to comply, usually. Achashverosh, however, made an instructive exception. He knows that he may demonstrate, this is what he says, listen carefully. He knows that he may demonstrate his power by issuing commands and having them obeyed. You can demonstrate your power by issuing commands and having them obeyed. Yet he senses that he can achieve more by granting a small measure of freedom. For the spirit seeks a control over others which is not sated by mere physical obedience. Certainly, Achashverosh wants to feel that his subjects fear him and will do his bidding. But he wants much more. To truly feel he controls his people, he needs to rule their emotions first and foremost. He needs to love and respect him and to desire his rule. That's what make him feel more secure, and also somehow deal with it. Secure in reality and secure in some of his internal insecurities. There is no better way of gaining the gratitude of others than by using power to bestow liberty. Using power to bestow liberty, for this means granting a gift of power to another. So he used power, hashtiyah kadat, here's the rule, drink as you like. And it is a mind game that's going on here, right? That according to this read, they grant them a little bit of liberty and they say, I feel so free. I feel so free. And I thank you, Mr. Achashverosh, or King Achashverosh, or Dictator Achashverosh. We are your humble servants. We are your loyal servants. And here we just sort of raise this point. Dan, we lost you, man. I don't know. We haven't had a good track record with Dan. So here's this interesting dynamic that it is unwieldy to rule over 127 provinces. It is not a simple matter at all. And you might indeed be a powerful force who can, with an iron fist, force a great deal on other people. But what do you actually know about your dictatorship? If the people what?
They had their choice, they would get rid of you. They throw you away.
If they had their choice, they get rid of you, yes. And if the people en masse decide they don't want you, they can get rid of you. Now, even though you have all the power, right? And you can crush them all. So great, you crush them all and you have nobody, you don't have anybody. Then you have territory, you have anybody. So this is not an uncommon thing. This first he talked about a parallel to what Chazoni, how he reads this line here. In antiquity, when a ruler felt that the people there were stirrings amongst the people of dissatisfaction with him, even if he again ruled by his own power over them, he knew that he had to take certain actions. So one of those actions was called the Misharum. The Misharum was the official release of all debts by fiat of the king. And generally, who are you pleasing when you do that?
People in debt.
The poor commoners, right? And not the wealthy noblemen, right? But the poor commoners. But the truth is, if all the poor commoners, rebel against you, you got a mess in your hands. So they would use it as a release valve on the pressures of on your rule, and you would regain their favor, right? What's the Torah's pushback against that? Shemitah, correct. Yeah. And it can be argued that God insists that in order to avoid the corruptive nature of release of debts as a way for strongmen to retain their power, the Torah says no. Every 7 years, it's going to happen by God's fiat, not by any human's fiat. Okay, and so it's built into the system. So there's a reality here that he's trying to keep people at bay, pleasing them, and respond to them because he knows if they wish they could act up and rebel, and everything will come crashing down like a house of cards. It just doesn't, aside, we think about just what's going on right this second, and there's so much, we have to appreciate about the people of Ukraine. We know two facts. Number one is that if Putin wants to, what can he do in a minute?
He can destroy
He
everybody.
can destroy them all, right? He can destroy them all.
Mhm.
All of everything that's happening right now in the international community is to make it clear just what price that all this is going to pay, he'll be paying, and then what will be worth, right? And the truth is, he doesn't want to destroy all these things because he wants a functioning country of Ukraine that he can control in one way or another.
Right.
That's not, beyond that, we're not going to analyze. But so that's what's happening in Ukraine. In Russia, 6,000 people already have been arrested for protests. I don't know how many thousands and thousands taking the streets, but if hundreds of thousands of people take the streets, he can't survive that.
Right.
Tens of thousands he can survive because he can brutalize them and arrest them and throw them into the gulag, right? But hundreds of thousands every day and more pouring out, that would just, all of that, the dictator will not survive that. So far, it hasn't happened. We pray that should happen. So back to our story here. So he is trying, it seems, through all of this to manage to gain the favor of and manipulate. This is all about a strategy for he's all powerful, but also is weak. He knows he's got a weakness. Now, how is it that he is in power? Do we know anything about that so far in the Megillah?
So far, the Megillah? No, but we know that it doesn't say it yet. But.
Right. So all we know is the Megillah begins, he's the king. Right? Just accept this fact. He's a very powerful man who rules for 127 provinces. So is he this this awesome general who was vanquished 177 provinces, or is he someone who
married into it?
It has not come to him that way. Let's take a look for a minute at first the Gemara, and then we'll come back to this. Hold on. The Gemara. Yeah. So, Dan, you want to read it for us? The Gemara continues the explanation.
Sure. The Gemara continues with its explanation of the Book of Esther, beginning with a discussion of the name Achashverosh. Rav said the name should be viewed as a contraction, the brother of the head.
The brother of the head, Achiv Shel Rosh. Achashverosh. Read it as if it's Achiv Shel Rosh, the brother of the head, and
of the same character as the head, Ben Gilo Shel Rosh.
Yeah, I don't see how Ben Gilo works from that Achashverosh, but it means Ben Gilo means one of two things. Either means that of the same generation, technically means the same generation, Ben Gil, same age, but if they're trading it to mean something different, then you assume the same character. Okay, what does it mean of the same character as the head? I'm sorry, the brother of the head, go on.
Rav explains the brother of the head. That is the brother of the wicked Nebuchadnezzar, who is called head. As it is stated, you are the head of gold.
Aha. He's the brother of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, I don't know what that means. Does it mean that he is he is actually, he and Nebuchadnezzar share the same mommy and daddy, right? Or does it mean somehow he is his equivalent to him? I don't know. Not sure if maybe you are asserting that. Go on, the same character.
Of the same character as the head, for he, Nebuchadnezzar, killed the Jews, and he, Achashverosh, sought to kill them.
Let's stop there for now. So that's one rendering of this. We know the next story. Bobby already, handed out. What's the next story that happens? Starting with Pasuk Tet.
Vashti comes into the picture.
The Vashti story, right? The Vashti story. What's the story of Vashti? He decides, he gives an order that she come, right? That she come to, here, let's read it here. She also made a feast. By Yom HaShvi, on the seventh day, when he was good and drunk. He told his 7 advisors to bring Vashti the queen before the king in the royal crown, to show off to them not just the glory of his palace and fine fabrics, but the fine body of his wife. Okay, we know by tradition, when it says to bring her becheter malchut, what is the drasha on that verse? Bring her in the royal crown.
That she was naked.
Correct. The hyper literal reading is only in the royal crown, right? She should be made to come in naked. Okay. And she refused. But and the queen Vashti refused B'dvar Melch to come at his order. Through the eunuchs. Like he got very, very, very angry. So why did he want to bring her or have her brought there that day?
Show her off.
Yes.
He was the one in control, not her.
Okay, so yes and yes, right? So the first version is to show her off. I have all my other vessels that I've shown you, and the Gemara actually discusses this. Let me show you my fine vessel, my wife. Okay, and all talking dirty. Everyone's talking really, locker room and worse kind of conversation between people, and then she's brought in, right? Interestingly, by the way, the only reason this happens, and the Torah and Megillah makes it very clear, it premises this by saying on the seventh day, what? Kitov Lev HaMelech Bayayin. Kitov Lev HaMelech Bayayin. When he is good and drunk, right? It is not a smart move. If he had his wits about him fully, he might not have done this. But because he allowed himself to drink, he made a really, really unwise choice here, right? I think there is a midrash somewhere that says that he's smart enough to know that the rest of the 180 days he doesn't drink. He doesn't drink because he's got to be on his game the whole time. Let's pause for a second. I want you to look at this for a second. We're perhaps familiar with this machlokas in the Gemara between Rav and Shmuel about the Megillah explains that 180 days first for all the foreign service, and then 7 days for the local Shushanites. So Rav and Shmuel disagree. One says he was Bikeach, Melch Bikeach. He's a smart king. He's clever. Another says he's a tipesh. He's a fool. The one who said, right? You want to read it, Bobby?
Sure. The one who held he was a clever king said that he did well. He did well in entertaining his distant subjects first because he could win over the inhabitants of his own city anytime he wished. The one who held that he was foolish says that he ought to have entertained the inhabitants of his metropolis first, so that if others rebelled against him, these would have supported him.
So there's a lot of strategy. A lot of strategy that has to happen. Who do I feast up? Who do I take for granted, or who do I just and yep. But what this agreement though is going to continue forward. Is he a smart man or is he a foolish man? Is he a smart man or foolish man? Is he clever or not clever? Our former president referred to Putin as very, very Smart, clever, and the truth was, yeah, it was a clever move, but I just can't say those words on, the way that he says them, right? Evil men can be clever, right? So you have to make sure you have to add in he's an evil, clever man. So clever or foolish is part of this question here, but if he is desperately trying to control a great deal, and is it just the 127 provinces, or is it the larger question of his place here? And if I asked the question earlier, is it that he is a grand general that has accomplished this? Or is it that he comes to his rule from another source? So we mentioned he's a brother of Nebuchadnezzar in this phrase. What else? What's the other version of the story? Anybody remember the other version of the story?
That Vashti had more power and he married her and he took her power.
Yeah, right. The Midrashic teaching is that Vashti is Belshazzar's daughter. Who had reigned, and he was the stable hand, I think is what it's told. I think he's a stable hand, and somehow he marries Vashti, and when Belshazzar is killed, so that he rises to power. That's rendering. So what's he always facing? Always.
Someone's going to go after him.
Yeah, he could be assassinated, but he always faces the sense of self-doubt and fear that I will be seen as the usurper, as an unworthy candidate to be president, to be of all these 170 provinces. Even actually, there were fewer provinces, and he led an expansion that was all under his actions. But still, it comes down to a basic insecurity, because in the end, he's only the king. Why? Because he married the princess. Yes? Bobby's responding. Anybody else with us? Mick, you with us? Dan, you with us? Yes? Yeah. Okay. So how do you put the story of the Vashti being called into that context? Why does he call Vashti to come and appear to show off her beauty, naked or not, to show off her beauty? What is that act implicitly?
It's control.
Right. That she's obedient to him.
She's obedient to him. He rules because he is the ruler, not anything else. Now, maybe a few years ago, we actually looked at this, and the Malbim's read of this. If you follow, he claims that the real distinction between Pasuk Yud Aleph and Yud Beit, and it follows the rest of the story. Lahavi et Vashti Hamalka versus Hamalka Vashti. Vashti the queen and the queen Vashti. He feels isn't just a synonymous use of phrases, but he feels it's the essence of the distinction. Achashverosh wants to make a statement that she's Vashti, who happens to be the queen, because she's married to him, right? She wants to make it very clear. I am Hamalka Vashti. I am the queen Vashti, and you are only who you are because you're married to me. And so this is his attempt to try to assert himself and his stature as a independently powerful individual. And that's why this is a strategically decided move, even though he's drunk in this, right? And she says, I'm not playing along. And I will not see you that way. You are only who you are because of me. And in the end, that is an existential threat to him. Now it's an existential threat to him. And he has to offer, we don't know, right? Is she sent away, or is she killed, right? But even if he loves her, he's in too deep, and his sense of his insecurity, and I say insecurity on a few different levels, right? For the reality of not being secure in your position, because 127 provinces, a lot of provinces to control, right? And seemingly his human insecurities, about inadequacy and always questioning, his position and his rights and his roles, and have now been directly challenged and brought forth. And so he's going to have to put her out in order to maintain himself. That is a really fascinating storyline. And we know that Chazal read this parak as a Jewish story, that it's the story of Achashverosh having a seuda to celebrate the fact that 70 years have come and gone in Israel, and the Jews haven't returned to Israel. So it is a seuda celebrating the vanquishing of God. Basically, that's the midrashic read of the story. And so, as we often point out, Kelim Shonim, which I read earlier, is a reference to how fancy it is that no vessel matched the other one. Everything was just unique and different. What is our tradition to read it? How do we do it?
With Eicha.
We read it as Eicha. V'chelim shonim. Every once in a while, we have some other readers in the shul. They don't do it. I'm always frustrated that they don't follow that. That's a very powerful minhag that we do, right? That he brought out the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash, and Belshazzar miscalculated, and that's how the writing on the wall got him done away with, right? But he calculated, he thought correctly, in the end of really 70 years. And so he was going to celebrate that. And then the Jews who were present and didn't walk out or didn't defy, whatever, so everyone's culpable. And that's the theological premise. They read chapter 1 as a theological premise for how it is the Jews almost faced utter extermination. It must be that they allowed themselves to partake of the Sudas Achashverosh, which was celebrating their own loss of any of the Beis HaMikdash. So that we can read that story. But in addition to that story, this is a story about power and threat, and because of this, it becomes the premise for how it is suddenly that Esther can become a king and set up for her to be able to save them. And that verse says it's not Achashverosh who was the threat to the Jews; it was Haman who's the threat to the Jews. So we're going to pause here, and next week we'll continue and talk about where this man fits in the Haman story altogether, and take it further. I hope it gave you some reflection, even on the realities of the very present moment too.
Sounds good.
Hoping we pray that the people of Ukraine should be safe, to be able to defy this man, and that the world stop this man, and that our brethren there as well should live in safety. All right, everyone. Wishing you all a good night.
Good night.